I woke up to the sound of a jackhammer rattling through my walls, shaking my coffee mug right off the kitchen counter. The crash sent ceramic shards skidding across the tile floor. But that wasn't the part that made my stomach drop. It was when I stepped outside and saw it, the horror unfolding in my own backyard. A massive hole was being dug, right on my property line. No, scratch that. On my property. And standing there, in her wide-brimmed sun hat and a smug little smirk, was Karen. My neighbor. My HOA president. My personal nightmare. She sipped her iced tea and barely spared me a glance. Oh good, you're up. This is just a tiny pool extension. Nothing to worry about. My jaw almost unhinged. Tiny? The thing looked like a small-scale water park was being installed. A half-dozen workers were sweating under the sun, moving tiles, pouring cement, and widening her already absurdly large pool, directly onto my land. I marched toward her, trying to keep my voice level. Karen, what the hell is this? She finally looked at me, blinking as if she was confused. It's an improvement for the whole neighborhood. A bigger pool means better property values. I assumed you'd be grateful. Grateful? I nearly choked. You're literally building on my land. Without permission. Karen waved a manicured hand dismissively. Oh, Jake, it's just a little extra space. You weren't using it anyway. Besides, the HOA approved it. That was when I realized how deep this insanity ran. Karen, I'm not even in the HOA. A flicker of irritation crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with another one of her tight-lipped, I control everything smiles. Technicalities, she said, then turned back to the workers. Keep going, boys. I could feel my blood pressure spiking. My fists clenched, my vision narrowed, and every reasonable part of me screamed to call a lawyer, report her, do something. But Karen wasn't just a terrible neighbor. She was the queen of HOA loopholes and smug manipulation. And right now, she thought she'd won. So instead of yelling, instead of losing my mind right there on the lawn, I took a deep breath and did something she never expected. I smiled, because if Karen thought she was about to get away with this, she had no idea what was coming. It had all started months ago when I moved into this neighborhood, lured by the promise of quiet streets, good weather, and a house that wasn't a shoebox. What I hadn't realized was that I'd purchased my home right next to the most insufferable HOA president to ever walk the earth. Karen was the kind of person who made it her life's mission to uphold community standards, even in places where she had zero authority. The first time we met, she welcomed me with a fake-friendly smile and an 80-page HOA rulebook. I remember staring at it in confusion. I'm not actually part of the HOA, I'd told her. She laughed like I'd made a joke. Oh, sweetie, it's just best if everyone follows the rules. Keeps the neighborhood looking nice. I should have known then that she was trouble. Over the next few weeks, she left passive-aggressive notes taped to my door. Your grass is 2 inches too high. Please mow immediately. Your garbage cans were left out for 45 minutes longer than HOA regulations allow. Your porch light is what's too bright. Every time, I ignored her. Every time, she escalated. Then came the decorations. I set up a few simple lawn gnomes one day, just to annoy her. That was the moment she declared war. The next morning, I found a formal HOA violation notice in my mailbox. It had zero legal authority, but the audacity of it made my blood boil. And now she had taken things to a whole new level. She wasn't just annoying me with fake fines or complaining about my yard. She was stealing my land. I stormed over to the construction workers, waving my arms. Hey, stop. This is my property. You can't do this. One of them, a guy covered in cement dust, shrugged. Lady said it was approved. Lady is lying, I snapped. Karen let out a theatrical sigh, like I was some unruly child throwing a tantrum. Oh, Jake, you're being dramatic. Just let them finish. You won't even notice. I wanted to strangle something, preferably her ridiculous sun hat. Instead, I did what any reasonable person would do. I called the city. A few hours later, an inspector showed up. He took one look at the in-progress pool theft and raised an eyebrow. You got a permit for this? Karen smiled. Oh, absolutely. The HOA approved everything. The inspector turned to me. And you're okay with this? I pointed at my property line, which Karen's shiny new tiles had obliterated. Does it look like I'm okay with this? The inspector's face darkened. Ma'am, you can't expand onto someone else's land without legal consent. Karen's smile cracked. But it's already built. Then you better start undoing it. For the first time, she looked nervous. But Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat so easily. "Fine," she snapped. "We'll figure something out. But trust me, Jake, you're making a huge mistake." I just grinned. "Oh, Karen, you have no idea." She stormed off, leaving me standing by the pit that was supposed to be part of her pool. I looked down at the water that was beginning to fill it, at the workers packing up, at the absurdity of what she had tried to pull. She thought this was over. It wasn't. Not even close. The morning after the city inspector left, I half expected Karen to come banging on my door with another one of her fake violation notices. But there was no knock, no smug voice calling my name. Instead, she was outside, pacing by the half-finished extension of her pool, barking orders at some poor contractor who looked like he deeply regretted ever taking this job. I stood on my porch with my coffee, watching the show. Karen was in crisis mode. She wasn't used to not getting her way, and now that the city had put her illegal construction on hold, she was scrambling for a way to get around the rules. I could hear bits of her conversation from across the yard. "There has to be a way. Maybe we just move the property line," she hissed, as if that was something you could casually rearrange like patio furniture. The contractor just scratched his head and muttered something that didn't seem to satisfy her. She huffed, spun on her heel, and stormed inside, slamming her door hard enough that a flock of birds shot out of the nearby trees. I smirked. This was only the beginning. The next few days were suspiciously quiet. No HOA notices, no complaints, no ridiculous attempts to enforce rules that didn't apply to me. It felt wrong, like the calm before the storm. And then, just when I thought she might be taking the loss gracefully, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by her massive SUV. I stood there in my pajamas, blinking at the absolute audacity of it. Her car wasn't just parked a little too close. It was angled in such a way that I couldn't even pull out. I knocked on her door, my patience hanging by a thread. She opened it with a sickeningly sweet smile. "Oh, good morning, Jake. Is something wrong?" "Yeah," I said, pointing to the barricade she had turned my driveway into. "Your car." "Oh, that. I'm so sorry. I had a guest over last night and didn't realize they parked in your way. I'll have it moved soon." I folded my arms. "Soon? When?" She gave me a slow, infuriating shrug. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe after my morning tea? I like to take my time in the mornings." It was a power move. She wanted me to react, to get frustrated, to start an argument she could twist into making herself the victim. I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I just nodded, turned around, and made a phone call. 15 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up in front of her house. The moment she saw it, she came flying out the door, robe flapping, face red with outrage. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. I took a sip of my coffee, watching as the driver hooked up her car. "Oh, I just figured you needed a little help moving it." "You can't do this." "I was going to move it." "Well, you said soon, and I'm a firm believer in efficiency." She sputtered in pure, unfiltered rage as the tow truck pulled her car away. I didn't even have to pay for it. Turns out blocking someone's driveway was enough reason for the city to remove it. That should have been enough to get her to back off, but Karen didn't know how to quit. The next day, I got a notice in my mailbox, a fine for having an unapproved color on my mailbox. The HOA letter was ridiculous. It claimed that my mailbox needed to be a shade of beige, which was laughable because my house wasn't even in the HOA's jurisdiction. I crumpled it up and tossed it straight into the trash. That afternoon, I went out and bought the most obnoxious neon green spray paint I could find. The next morning, Karen walked out to get her mail and nearly had a stroke when she saw my newly painted, radioactive-looking mailbox. She stood there for a full 10 seconds, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then, without a word, she turned and stormed back inside. Less than an hour later, I saw her on the phone, waving her arms in frustration. I had a feeling she was trying to report me to someone, but there was no rule-breaking here. No HOA authority. Just pure, unfiltered pettiness. Karen was relentless. A few days after the mailbox incident, I woke up to find my trash cans missing. Completely gone. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, until I checked my security camera footage. There she was sneaking around in the middle of the night, rolling them away like a raccoon with a grudge. I checked the footage again and realized she hadn't just taken them. She had dumped my trash onto my lawn. I could have called the city again, but that felt too easy. Instead, I decided to return the favor. That night, under the cover of darkness, I gathered up all the trash she had so kindly gifted me and returned it to her yard. But I didn't just dump it in a pile. I got creative. I spread it evenly across her perfectly manicured lawn, making sure it looked like it had been naturally scattered by the wind. The next morning, she came outside and screamed. Actually screamed. I stood on my porch, sipping my coffee, watching the meltdown unfold. She ran inside, came back out with her phone, and started taking pictures like she was about to file some kind of lawsuit against the universe. Then she spotted me, watching, smirking. Her eyes narrowed. You did this. I took another sip. I have no idea what you're talking about, Karen. She stormed over, fury rolling off her in waves. You think this is funny? Kind of, yeah. Her hands clenched into fists. I'm going to make your life miserable. I gave her a slow, lazy grin. Karen, you already tried that. And guess what? You lost. She glared at me for another few seconds, then spun on her heel and stormed back inside. But I knew she wasn't done. Karen never admitted defeat. And I wasn't done either. Because this was just the warm-up. The real revenge was coming. I knew Karen wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. She had spent years terrorizing this neighborhood with her fake authority, and now that she had finally met resistance, she was going to double down. The funny part was, I wanted her to. The more she pushed, the worse it would be for her in the long run. She was setting herself up for the perfect downfall, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. For a few days, she went suspiciously quiet. No HOA notices, no fake fines, no ridiculous complaints about my mailbox or my trash cans. I almost started to believe she had finally decided to back off. Then, one evening, I stepped outside and saw her standing near the half-finished pool extension, deep in conversation with a man in a suit. I didn't have to be a genius to figure out what was happening. She was trying to find a legal loophole, some way to get around the city inspector's decision. Maybe she thought she could refile the permit under a different name or convince someone in the city office that she had a right to build onto my property. Either way, it didn't matter. She could try all she wanted, but the law was on my side. A few days later, I got my proof. A letter from the city arrived in my mailbox, officially declaring that Karen's pool expansion was in violation of property laws. It also included a warning that if the illegal portion wasn't removed, she would be facing serious fines. I walked over to her house, letter in hand. She answered the door with a fake smile, but the moment she saw the envelope, her expression twisted. Looks like your little project isn't happening, I said, handing her the letter. She snatched it, her eyes scanning the page, her face turning red. This is ridiculous. I'll fight it. Go ahead, I said. But I doubt the city's going to change their mind just because you think HOA rules matter more than actual laws. She clenched her jaw so hard I thought her teeth might shatter. Without another word, she slammed the door in my face. That should have been the end of it. Any normal person would have accepted defeat and moved on. But Karen was incapable of backing down. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rushing water. At first, I thought maybe a pipe had burst. Then I looked outside and saw what had happened. Karen had filled the unfinished portion of her pool with water. It wasn't connected to anything. There were no pumps, no proper filtration, nothing. Just a giant, stagnant pool of water sitting on my land. I had to give her credit. It was a bold move. A stupid one, but bold nonetheless. I walked over, hands in my pockets, shaking my head. She was standing on her patio, sipping another one of her endless iced teas, looking as smug as ever. Problem, Jake, she called. Oh no, I said. Just wondering how long it'll take before the city fines you for dumping water onto my property. Her smile faltered, just for a second. It's not on your property, she said, but we both knew that was a lie. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures. Guess we'll find out. She tried to act like she wasn't worried, but the way she stormed back inside told me otherwise. Now, I could have just let the city handle it. I could have reported the violation and let her rack up more fines. But that wasn't enough. Karen had spent months making my life difficult. She had gone out of her way to harass me, to steal from me, to try and bully me into submission. If she wanted a war, she was going to get one. So I drained the pool. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, I did it carefully. Slowly. Every night, I went outside and removed just a little bit of water. Not enough for her to notice immediately, but enough that the levels started dropping. At first, she thought it was just evaporation. Then she started blaming the workers, demanding to know if there was a leak. She spent hours stomping around, yelling at everyone except the person actually responsible. It took her a week to realize what was happening. One morning, I stepped outside to find her standing by the pool, arms crossed, staring at the half-empty hole in the ground. When she spotted me, her face twisted with fury. "You did this," she hissed. "Did what?" I asked innocently. "You drained my pool." I shrugged. "That's a wild accusation. Got any proof?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Of course, she had no proof. She knew I did it, but she couldn't prove a thing. "This isn't over," she snapped. I smiled. "Oh, I know." Later that night, I went a step further. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd show her just how dirty things could get. I rented a truck. I got dirt. Lots of it. And then, while she was away at an HOA meeting, I filled in the entire pool extension. I wasn't subtle about it. I had workers come in broad daylight, dump load after load of soil right into that half-dug pit, and smooth it out. By the time Karen got home, there was no trace of her illegal pool expansion. Just a nice, freshly planted garden. She lost her mind. I heard the scream from inside my house. The kind of primal, rage-filled sound that probably made dogs in the next neighborhood flinch. She stormed over, banging on my door so hard I thought she might break it down. I took my time answering. When I finally did, she was red-faced, breathing like a bull about to charge. "What the hell did you do?" she shrieked. "Fix the problem," I said. "Since you couldn't seem to follow city regulations, I took care of it for you." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "I'll sue you for this." "Go ahead," I said. "But considering the city already ordered you to remove the pool, I doubt you'll get very far." Her face contorted with rage, but she had nothing left to say. No threats, no arguments, nothing. Because she knew, for the first time in her life, she had truly lost. She stormed away, slamming her door so hard that the wreath on it fell off. I stood there for a moment, watching, waiting to see if she'd come back out for another round. But she didn't. For the first time since I moved in, Karen was silent. And it was the most beautiful sound in the world. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. After I filled in her illegally expanded pool with dirt, I expected her to either try another underhanded tactic or, at the very least, attempt some passive-aggressive nonsense to get back at me. But what I didn't expect was her silence. It stretched on for days, which was wildly out of character for her. No complaints, no HOA notices, no ridiculous accusations. Just silence. It should have been a relief, but something about it felt wrong. Karen was the kind of person who thrived on control, and losing it wasn't something she could just let go of. She was planning something. Then, a week later, I found out exactly what. It started with a knock at my door. When I opened it, 2 men in suits stood on my porch, looking annoyingly official. One of them held a clipboard, the other had a folder in hand. They introduced themselves as attorneys representing the Homeowners Association. "Mr. Jake," the one with the clipboard said in a practiced, rehearsed voice, "we're here regarding an ongoing issue with your property and the Homeowners Association." I leaned against the doorframe, unimpressed. "I'm not in the HOA." The second lawyer smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of look someone gave you when they thought they had already won. "Yes, but Ms. Karen has brought forth a legal complaint. She claims that your actions have directly impacted the community and violated neighborhood aesthetics." I actually laughed. "So, let me get this straight. She illegally expanded her pool onto my property, refused to fix it, got fined by the city, and now she's trying to sue me?" "She's seeking damages," clipboard guy said. "For what?" "Fixing her mistake. She's arguing that you acted maliciously and damaged shared neighborhood space," the second lawyer said, flipping through his folder. "Her claim states that your actions devalued her property." It took everything in me not to burst into laughter. This was peak Karen behavior. If she couldn't win through intimidation, she'd try to win through legal nonsense. I crossed my arms. "All right, let's say this goes to court. What do you think a judge is going to say when they see the city's ruling against her? Because I have all the paperwork proving she was in the wrong. The city ordered her to remove the pool extension. I just helped move things along." Clipboard guy hesitated, clearly aware that their case was standing on toothpicks. The second lawyer sighed and snapped his folder shut. "We'll be in touch." I smiled, looking forward to it. They left, and I didn't hear anything else from them after that. Because, as expected, no lawyer in their right mind was going to take on a case where the defendant had actual legal backing, while the plaintiff was just an entitled HOA dictator who thought rules didn't apply to her. That didn't mean Karen was done, though. If she couldn't use the legal system to scare me, She was going to fall back on what she did best: petty, exhausting harassment. First, my mail stopped arriving. At first, I thought maybe it was just a delay, but after a full week of getting nothing, not even junk mail, I got suspicious. A quick trip to the post office revealed the problem. "Yeah, looks like a mail hold was placed on your address," the clerk told me. "Mail hold?" I frowned. "I didn't request that." The clerk squinted at the screen. "Huh, that's weird. It says it was submitted by your HOA." I let out a slow, steady breath to keep from laughing in pure disbelief. "I'm not in an HOA." The clerk gave me a knowing look. "Then someone's messing with you." It took an hour to fix, but eventually, my mail was reinstated. I asked if there was a way to prevent it from happening again, and they assured me that any future holds would require in-person verification. That should have been the end of it, but I knew Karen wasn't going to stop. And I was right. A few days later, I noticed a city inspector outside my house taking notes. I went outside, already knowing exactly who had called them. "Morning," the inspector greeted. "Got a report about some unauthorized landscaping on this property." I sighed. "Let me guess. Karen." He smirked. Didn't say her name, but based on the address that reported it, I'd say that's a safe bet. I took him over to the garden where I had filled in Karen's illegal pool expansion. The inspector looked at the dirt, nodded approvingly, and made a note in his book. "Yeah, you're fine," he said. "Actually, you did a good job covering the area. If anything, it's safer now than before. Should I be worried about more complaints?" He chuckled. "Probably. But don't worry. People like her file nonsense all the time. It never holds up." Sure enough, a few days later, Karen was at it again. This time, she put up a petition to have me removed from the neighborhood. I found out when one of my other neighbors, a guy named Dave, knocked on my door, laughing so hard he could barely talk. "You have to see this," he said, handing me a paper. It was a printed-out petition, complete with dramatic wording about how I was ruining the integrity of the neighborhood and actively working against the community's best interests. She had gone full dictator mode, complete with an official-looking HOA stamp at the bottom, despite the fact that I wasn't under her HOA's control. She had even gone door-to-door asking for signatures. "What's the response been like?" I asked Dave. "Oh, it's hilarious," he said. "Most people told her to get lost. A few signed just to shut her up, but everyone knows it's meaningless." I could have ignored it, but I wanted Karen to understand, once and for all, that she had lost. So I made my own petition. A vote of no confidence in Karen as HOA president. I didn't go door-to-door. I didn't have to. All I did was print a few copies and leave them at a popular neighborhood cafe. Within 3 days, over half the neighborhood had signed it. When Karen found out, she lost her mind. I was outside watering my lawn when she stomped over, practically shaking with rage. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked. I looked at her calmly. Yeah, I do." She sputtered, grasping for words, then finally hissed, "You have no idea what you've done." I grinned. "Oh, I think I do." The HOA board had received the petition, and with that many signatures, they couldn't ignore it. Karen was about to lose everything she had spent years controlling. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. And I wasn't done yet. Karen's downfall wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. After the petition to remove her as HOA president gained traction, the entire neighborhood seemed to shift. People who had once cowered under her iron rule suddenly found their voices. The whispers started first. Neighbors exchanging amused glances when they passed her house, people openly questioning why they had allowed her to control them for so long. Then came the open complaints. The HOA board, which had always been a mix of reluctant volunteers and Karen's personal cronies, was now faced with something they had never dealt with before: actual resistance. They called a special meeting to discuss the concerns of the community. Karen, of course, tried to present it as an opportunity to clear the air and remind everyone of the importance of maintaining neighborhood standards. She never saw the ambush coming. The meeting, held in the community clubhouse, was packed. More people showed up than had ever attended one of her HOA gatherings before. Normally, these meetings were just a formality, a chance for Karen to flex her power, while everyone else nodded along to avoid conflict. But this time, people weren't here to listen. They were here to end her reign. As soon as the meeting started, the complaints poured in. One by one, people stood up and told their stories. The fake fines, the ridiculous rules, the way she had manipulated the HOA to serve her personal vendettas. A retired couple talked about how she had tried to fine them for having a flagpole that was supposedly too high. A young mom recounted the time Karen reported her for excessive noise because her toddler had been playing outside. A man who had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade stood up and bluntly stated that the HOA had turned into a dictatorship under Karen's leadership. Karen sat there, eyes darting back and forth, face growing redder with every passing second. She kept trying to interject, to regain control, but no one was listening. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid of her. Then Dave, my neighbor and now one of my personal heroes, stood up and delivered the final blow. "I think it's clear that this HOA is no longer serving the interests of the community," he said, holding up the petition. "And if the board won't take action, maybe it's time we start discussing dissolving the HOA altogether." The room erupted. Karen shot up from her chair. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "You can't just, this neighborhood needs structure." "Or maybe," Dave said, "we just needed to get rid of the one person making life miserable for everyone else." The vote was held then and there. Karen was removed as HOA president by an overwhelming majority. She tried to argue, tried to spin it as a temporary setback, but it didn't matter. The board members, who had once been too afraid to cross her, weren't afraid anymore. The next morning, Karen's HOA sign, the one she had proudly placed in front of her house declaring herself president, was gone. But that wasn't enough. Karen might have lost her title, but she still lived in the neighborhood, and I knew she wasn't going to just let this go. She was too stubborn, too convinced of her own superiority. And sure enough, within a few days, she was at it again. First, she tried to rally support. She went door to door, trying to convince people that without her leadership, the neighborhood would fall into chaos. She gave dramatic speeches about declining property values, increasing crime, and how outsiders would come in and destroy their way of life. It didn't work. People were done with her. Then she tried to reestablish her authority in smaller ways. Passive-aggressive notes left on doorsteps, calling in anonymous complaints about imaginary violations, glaring at anyone who so much as dared to ignore her. But she wasn't the queen anymore. And without her title, without her power, all she had left was her bitterness. Then came the final breaking point. I came home one evening to find Karen standing on the sidewalk outside my house, staring at my yard. Her face was twisted in something between rage and despair. I followed her gaze and realized what she was looking at. The garden. The patch of land where her illegal pool extension had once been was now a peaceful, well-maintained little garden with flowers, shrubs, and a small bench. It was thriving. It wasn't just a reminder of her defeat. It was a permanent mark of her failure. She turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Not just anger. Not just arrogance. Defeat. "You ruined everything," she whispered. I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled. "No, Karen. You did that all by yourself." The next day, Karen put her house on the market. At first, she tried to frame it as her decision, telling anyone who would listen that she was moving on to bigger and better things. But we all knew the truth. She couldn't stand living in a neighborhood where she had no control, no power, no respect. Within a few months, she was gone. And the best part? The HOA, without its tyrant leader, collapsed completely. People stopped paying dues, meetings stopped happening, and eventually the HOA itself was formally dissolved. The neighborhood was finally free. One evening, I sat on my porch, sipping my beer, looking out at the peaceful street. No fake fines. No ridiculous rules. Just people enjoying their homes without some power-hungry dictator breathing down their necks. Dave walked by and waved. "Feels different, huh?" "Quieter," I said. He grinned. "Quieter is good." I nodded, taking another sip. Quieter was perfect.